Hi, and welcome to the Midday Market Update for June 16th, 2020. My name's Kevin Hill, here as always with Michael Vincent for our twice-weekly show on the freight markets and what's heating it up and what's cooling it down.
Right on. Welcome, everybody.
Completely interactive, isn't it, Michael Vincent?
It is. So get your questions and comments in on FreightWaves LinkedIn and Facebook, and we'll get them answered and speak to those comments as best that we can throughout the show. So please get them in here. So, hey, who do we got on today?
We have a great lineup of guests today. First off, we have LaRocco, CNBC booking host and the author of Trade War, Containers Don't Lie. She'll be talking about Asia-U.S. Container traffic and some of the trends that she's seeing in the data. Very cool. Talking about an article or her monthly column that she has on American Shipper and FreightWaves. And then we have Jared Flinn, who's the operating partner of bulkloads.com. And so a load board that caters, or their niche is with dry bulk, liquid bulk. So we're going to learn a little bit about what's going on in the agricultural markets and also with those raw materials. And
so they do a lot of raw materials, right?
Yeah, raw materials. So it's a load board for
out of the ground
hoppers, walking floors, end dumps, liquid tankers as well. So a little bit on the oil and fuel trends and those metrics coming from that load board and what's happening with that activity, which is the raw materials that power the economy. So it's that really that leading indicator for the health of the economy. And then we have our very own editor-at-large, John Kingston, to talk a little bit about debt and GLOBALTRANZ, and I'm sure the oil markets a little bit as well.
He loves his oil, doesn't he?
He does love his oil.
He likes to tell you how it's produced and go through all the chemistry and everything.
I know, right? And all the different
very
things
interesting,
that
very
go
interesting,
along
very
with
knowledgeable.
Oil, all the other elements.
Yeah, so this is going to be a great show because you think about it, it's really kind of both. We're talking about like two things that are leading indicators and maybe one that's kind of a back end indicator of results of things, because you look at imports and everybody's interested on what's happening with the, is Asia online? Aren't they online? I guess they are online, but what's the demand and what is the blank sailings doing to, the movement of freight and the cycle times for your supply chain? But then how does that affect all the surface transportation within the United States, right?
Exactly right.
So it's a leading type of thing to look at.
Yeah, and in her column that came out on American Shipper and FreightWaves this morning, it's about China.
Yeah.
But it's also about the apparel coming out of Vietnam and other countries in Southeast Asia and what's happening with the container traffic on that. So it's very interesting.
Excellent.
On
and
that
then
point.
Jared can talk to the stuff coming out of the ground that then goes into fuel production and movement of the economy. So, good leading indicator stuff.
Talk about leading indicators.
Awesome.
Mostly all day.
I love it.
But first, let's hit the news headlines with Andrew Cox, our research analyst here at FreightWaves.
Yeah.
And what do we have up on FreightWaves.com? This morning we had some breaking news about Volvo, didn't we, Andrew?
Yeah, Kevin, the first story comes from Alan Adler and talking about Sweden's Volvo Group. They just announced they're going to be laying off 4,100 white-collar jobs globally in the second half of 2020 in response to the ongoing effects of the coronavirus pandemic. About 15% of the cuts are contractors. Martin Lundstedt, the president and CDO of Volvo Group, said Tuesday that the corona epidemic and the global measures taken to fight it has led to a market situation impacting our industry severely. The effects are the effects are expected to be lower demand going forward, and we need to continue to adjust our organization accordingly.
Yeah, it's not really much of a shock, is it? I mean, you see it and you hate to see it, and it's kind of like, ooh, this is breaking news. But do you really go, wow, in these times? No, because it's pretty difficult times, right?
It is very difficult times. It brings up the question, you see this with the airlines and their earnings calls and kind of their expectations that they're going to be much smaller companies going forward for an extended period of time after, because of this crisis. And is it going to be a similar type of thing for auto manufacturers and car brands? Are they paring down to be a smaller versions of themselves, at least for the next few years?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew.
Well, we've seen multiple car companies already, especially international brands. We've seen Continental and Renault already lay off thousands of people. Renault laid off 15,000 people just last month. So we're seeing this across the board. I do agree with you, Kevin. I think this is going to be similar to the airlines. They're expecting much lower demand. They're doing anything and everything they can to make sure that they can remain, operationally and profitable moving forward. I think they're looking at a slimmer future for most of the automotive industry.
Yeah, so airline production, that type of stuff would be affected as well as the airlines themselves, right? But then, but in a trucking market as well, it's going to be quite a bumpy ride, I would imagine, right? I mean, because you've got basically capacity is starting to tighten a little bit, but you've still got a lot there. But you have, like we said, and we've talked about it a number of times, one of those indicators that John Kingston actually came to us with a couple weeks ago was the BMO numbers and talking about the impaired loans and failures for the smaller to medium-sized fleets. That's going to issue. If those guys go out, then you're going to have a flood of used trucks on the market, and you've got a ton of fleets with a ton of that have I guess a higher percentage of younger fleet. Is that right, Andrew? They got a younger fleet right now. The percentage is kind of skewed towards that, and it normally wouldn't be.
Yeah, carriers are swimming in young capacity right now, and that trade-in value when when a lot of these smaller carriers kind of go out of business or go under, that again, like you said, floods the used truck market, which brings down the trade-in values for the people that have new trucks, and that's kind of been a pillar of the demand for new trucks and for new automobiles as well. So if that trade-in value isn't there, you can see that really harms the OEMs and the manufacturers.
Yeah,
exactly. Thomas Smiley says hi, and he's watching on the Amazon app here with us. Our next headline, what do we have, Andrew?
The next one is from Todd Maiden. He's talking about the latest Cass Index and Freight Index report. They saw further declines in year-over-year declines in May. The result is likely a little bit worse than expectations. The latest report from Cass Information System throws a bit of a wet blanket on the April bottom discussion that has taken hold throughout the industry. While there was sequential improvement in shipments throughout May, the expenditures component fell another 5.7% from April. Stifel analyst John Ross classified both shipments and expenditures as remaining at recessionary levels in May. He expects to see some improvement in June, which is normally the best month of the second quarter, but cautioned that year-over-year growth was likely to be delayed. He said, "We do not believe we will reach 2019 freight activity levels until 2021 at the earliest, due to the significant rise in unemployment and other results of government intervention." And in summary, while the Cass shipments index likely bottomed for this cycle in April, May was not as strong as anticipated. June readings should be better, and like many other things right now, will depend on how quickly the economy reopens and how quickly the very high level of unemployment can retreat.
When I read through this, the first time I read through it, Andrew, it made me go, huh, that's kind of surprising. But then thinking through it, it actually kind of makes sense, because you're looking at these expenditures, and typically what they're measuring there is a week to 2 weeks behind, probably 2 weeks behind of invoices, et cetera. So you would expect that there'd be these lower invoices in May that were being paid, right? That were being processed through, that came from April. But then, in addition to that, when we're looking at, like, as we measure it in SONAR here at FreightWaves, is the op on tender volume, showing you the volume or number of truckloads. We're reporting its rise, but it really wasn't until mid-May that it started to move up. And later in May, moving up towards Memorial Day weekend, it actually crossed 2019. But at that time, when you look at the year over year, and I know we're looking at April to May numbers here with Cass, but when you look at over to versus 2019, when we crossed that, it was during a time last year where 2019 was in a pretty severe slump leading up to Memorial Day, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it was May 13th when OTVI crossed over in positive year over year.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
but
if you
it
look at the
was
delay,
really, I mean, when you looked at it, it was like, okay, we positively crossed over it, or did 2019's dumpster fire at the end of May cause that to happen? I mean, it dropped severely.
Yeah,
it was abnormally drop at the end of May in volumes last year, and I think that was really a trade war reflux, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, Michael. Late in May of last year, you had a lot of trade tensions between us and China. There was a lot of Trump tweets that were kind of sending the market and sending really the economy into a tailwind a little bit there at the end of May. That's why you saw volume so far down in our outbound tender volume index. And Kevin, you're right. It was May 13th when 2020 crossed over 2019. But up until that point, for the entire month of May, for those first 2 weeks, it was down significantly, double digits every single day compared to 2019. So these numbers they weren't so much surprising to me, but I guess it kind of puts things into perspective of how much we focus on this SONAR data, but our SONAR data is so much real time. We're looking at things on yesterday's basis. So I think the data doesn't skew that much. We're just looking at it from such a forward-looking view, and they're looking at a lagging view. But I agree. I don't think the data is all that far off. We're just now seeing capacity slowly and gradually climb up, and we're starting to see spot rates being pushed up for the last few weeks. But for the month of May, we just weren't seeing that.
Yeah, I think you explained it completely, just head on. It's such immediate data and so on, and we're looking at it right now that we think, oh wow, how is that? No, well, wait a minute. Actually, that's exactly what we were seeing back in May. And you're right. The OTRI is just now crossing 6, which would just getting into that territory where the overall nation spot rate should be on the rise a little bit. It's starting to get to that point right now where you see pockets of it and so on, but the CAS index and net expenditure is looking at the U.S. as a whole, right? So you've got to take that into account, and OTRI has just come up. So I would suspect, really, when we look at CAS for June, there is going to be an uptick. And maybe the expenditures won't be as high as we're going to think it is, because at the end of June, if OTRI seems to go up there, we're going to see rates that are fairly, pressure high by the end of June. If you look at next week, what could happen next week, but you have to take the whole month into account.
That is right. You might not see that until the August or the July numbers for CAS.
Exactly.
So on FreightWaves.com, Alan Adler reports truck traffic normalizes at faster speeds. What's going on there, Andrew?
Yeah, Kevin, truck traffic is about back to normal on the nation's highways and interstates, according to a study of 130 million trips by fleet management solutions provider Samsara Networks and their 15,000 customers. There were 2 safety-related items that stood out from their report. The first one was more speeding, and the second was less hard braking. Samsara looked at traffic and driving before, during, and after the lockdowns across the U.S. It also sampled from 5 major cities: Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Houston, and San Francisco. Speeding jumped about 40% in those cities in early April compared to the 20% increase nationwide. Samsara set its pre-COVID baseline for that first week of March, ending March 8th. Emptier roads after that resulted in a 20% increase in severe speeding, which is categorized as 11 or more miles per hour above the speed limit, especially in urban settings. Truckers navigating the American Transportation Research Institute's worst bottlenecks practically cruise through these cumbersome junctions in Atlanta and Houston, in which 3 of the top 5 worst bottlenecks are. But by May, as states began to lift the shelter-in-place orders and more vehicles returned to the roads, we started seeing those speeds come back down to normal and start decreasing.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we talked about, I guess it was yesterday, with David Bronstein, president of Together for Safer Roads.
Yes.
And yeah, he was saying with less traffic, because I was expecting him to tell us that with less traffic on the roads that accidents were down. They're actually up.
Really?
Yeah, because of speeding.
Sure.
And it kind of makes complete sense that has occurred, right?
it does. Certainly speeds are going to be higher because there's less traffic, and I guess that does lead to higher accidents.
It does, and one of the things that we talked about before, it just occurs to me, Andrew and Kevin, both of you, is and everybody watching, I suppose, if you're listening, when we looked at hours of service, right? We were looking at hours of service maybe like a year ago or 2 years ago. What we discovered was that those higher speeds, even a little bit higher speed, actually has a positive impact on available capacity.
Yes.
Because you're turning faster.
Mm-hmm.
So this would lead you to believe that there was a significantly faster transit times. You've got speeding, and you've got bottlenecks that are cleared up, correct?
Yeah, no,
would this not have a depressive effect on outbound tender rejections because capacity would actually be a little bit looser on regular lanes where you could turn faster?
If you can turn faster, you're increasing your productivity, which increases capacity or supply in the classic economic sense, which is going to depress rates.
Right.
I mean,
so if there's any shippers listening, you could also affect this by improving the wait times at pickup and delivery, which would improve speed time. Right. So.
That's exactly right. A few viewer comments here. Scott Luton, hello from Metro Atlanta. Hector Torres, owner at Robles Express. Hello from Robles Express LLC. Seaski Services says hello as well. And Calvin Johnson, the new tanker company. Hello from GNR Logistics from Mississippi.
All right.
Yeah. So excellent to hear from our viewers. And our next headline is about parcel and FedEx and UPS, right, Andrew?
Yeah, Kevin, in the past 2 weeks, UPS and FedEx imposed what both refer to as temporary charges on a portion of their U.S. residential deliveries to offset their higher costs related to the coronavirus outbreak. When and how they lift those surcharges is another matter. One expert who sees the surcharges becoming a permanent fixture is Glenn Gooding, president of consultancy iDrive Logistics and a 21-year veteran of the revenue management wars at UPS. Gooding said last week that both carriers will maintain so-called COVID-19 surcharges into the holiday shipping season, leaving shippers with what amounts to dual surcharges for the COVID-19 and for holidays during that period. But he believes the holiday surcharges will again fall away in the new year as they typically do. But meanwhile, he believes the pandemic surcharges will be integrated into the carrier's 2021 rate tables to reflect higher costs and demand. Other experts said the surcharges will eventually be lifted and not find their way to permanently enter carriers' rate tables. However, all differed in their forecasts for when the withdrawals would happen.
You know, Andrew, I'm sorry, but
I was just going to say, though, those surcharges, certainly the companies that charge them want that to be as sticky as possible. So we'll see how sticky those emergency surcharges or fees are.
You know what, and that's what I was going to talk about, is we'll see how sticky that is. And in my opinion, I don't know what your opinion is, Andrew or Kevin, but in my opinion, I think they're stickier. And comparing them to holiday surcharges isn't realistic, just because a holiday happens, it goes away. They have to hire on extra people. You have runners. If you've ever seen them coming off the UPS trucks where there's a driver and then they have a holiday runner who's running to the houses and dropping things off and stuff like that. And so you have these surcharges that occur, and it's obvious and it goes away. COVID-19 surcharges are a little bit different because it changed the dynamics of supply chain enough in e-commerce that added all this extra volume that's going through there and all these pressures and these operational things. I don't think they come down until they can find operational efficiencies to handle this volume, because the volume, I suspect, a significant portion of it is going to stick. It doesn't go away when the holiday.
I agree, and you're going to have waves of different areas of the country are going to have different waves coming in through the fall, and that's going to extend the life of the surcharges. And if that gets extended enough, then they become normal.
Yeah, they become normalized behaviors, and therefore you've got this added volume. And until you can find those efficiencies in the operations, they're going to stick. I would think, at least a portion of them.
What do you think about that, Andrew?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is if a chart that we've looked at during our Great Quarter Guides past a couple of weeks was the adoption of e-commerce. You saw that in the last 8 weeks, during the last 2 weeks of March into the first 2 weeks of May, you saw e-commerce growth rise as much as it had in the last 8 years previous. So you really did see a structural change in the way that consumers behave because of this coronavirus. So I actually do agree with you, Mike. I think that these charges are likely here to stay. That it's now at 27% e-commerce penetration. That number may come down a little bit, but it's never going to come back to where it was pre-COVID. It's always going to be higher. This just further accelerated e-commerce. So I agree with you. I think it has structurally changed, and these charges are here to stay.
Yeah, it's kind of like their operation has to find a new sweet spot, right? I mean, once you set up that operation, you've got this sweet spot of volume, which they had kind of, I guess, or close to it, or figuring it out, where it was no, and then you had the holiday influx, which took you out of that sweet spot and increased your expense, right? But then you also have the drop in volume, which would increase your expense too. There's kind of that sweet spot in the middle of where your operation is geared and tuned towards specific amount of volume and type of freight, and all that has changed.
It certainly has, yes. Our last headline of the day. John Gallagher reports FMCSA extends CDL and the medical permit renewal waiver that they put in place at the beginning of the pandemic. What do we have on that, Andrew?
Yeah, the federal waiver that was scheduled to expire June 30th that gives drivers with expired commercial driver's license and medical cards extra time to get them renewed has been extended through September 30th. The initial waiver was issued on March 24th by the FMCSA, which also applies to commercial learner's permits, was granted in response to closures of state motor vehicle departments in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. The waiver and its extension are also meant to address the limited resources available at medical facilities where capacity is under increasing pressure to respond to the coronavirus crisis. The extension, which goes into effect July 1st, provides the same relief from specified motor carrier regulations for CDL holders and CLP holders, as well as non-CDL holders provided by the March 24th waiver.
So to be expected.
The waiver out. It is, and it's a welcome release valve. I guess, for drivers. Mm-hmm. Right? And the pressures on those agencies and schools trying to make that happen, especially if they're reopening, but they've got to have specific safety regulations in place, which would mean, you can't have 2 students in a truck and stuff like that, right?
Right?
Which would kind of mess things up, but...
I know. Bruce Klein says, good day, listening in from Kentucky. And Chrissy Lewis, hello from Tri-State Expedited Freight Service in Perrysburg, Ohio.
Hey,
and I was
right near my hometown. Hey, at Perrysburg.
I was going to ask Andrew about what's coming up on Great Quarter, guys, but he took off here. But at 2 p.m., Andrew and I are going to, we'll be right back here live at the desk talking about, we're going to be talking a little bit about alternative data sources and how that's really powered financial and now logistics kind of operations. I was writing we're both writing a white paper on that that'll be published here in the next.
You're writing on what now? What was the
alternative data sources?
Okay.
Right. So these real-time data sources, kind of like the Bank of America consumer credit card and debit card transactions, the TSA, a lot of stuff that we do here in SONAR. Those alternative data sources, traffic patterns, wait times, real-time tender volume indexes. And, and that
it's interesting to me because you classify something as alternative data and it doesn't hit my brain that way because we look at all those things, but when you get it out there to the general industry, it does turn into alt data because it's some things that they didn't look at as leading indicators, right?
And
we're really looking at
alternative music, it becomes mainstream, right? So alternative data becomes mainstream after a while, so that whole progression. And then the Walmart Shopify partnership that was announced this week, we talked about that maybe a few months ago, even before COVID, or maybe right at the beginning, and we were saying, well, Walmart should just buy Shopify. But they're partnering to take on Amazon, so it's fascinating. And then we'll do our long, short segments
you need to get in and look at some of those supply chain trends in some of your white papers, and look at like so inventory, moving inventory, and live inventory, when you're talking about Target and Walmart and so on and so forth, and how they're trying to, or are successfully or not, whichever you want to look at it, but struggling with and succeeding somewhat in in-store fulfillment, right? And or post-store distribution centers, as they've talked about before, right? And how do you in-store fulfill orders when you've got moving inventory? You know it went on the shelf, but you don't know if it's still on the shelf.
You do not know.
It could be in someone's buggy. It could be in 10 people's buggies. It could have been moved from this shelf to that shelf. So how do you figure out how to fulfill all those different orders from those different stores?
Maybe using the same technologies that, whenever it's picked in a warehouse, it's picked, but I guess it's already been sold, so you've already accounted for it.
That's exactly right. When you pick it out of a warehouse, these are someone picked it off a shelf but hasn't bought it yet. So how do you optimize that supply chain when you're looking at that type of stuff? And it's interesting because the things that you read about, the different technologies, it comes from like echolocation to actually weight sensors in curved shelving to decide what the inventory is. It's really interesting.
Crazy. We have some more viewer comments here. Thomas Smiley again. I said this to my wife the other day. Definitely noticed people driving faster on 55 in Illinois. I imagine so. With less traffic, you just normally drive faster, right?
Yeah, there's no one there. Just go for it.
Yeah. And then Donovan Transportation, C Lane, says Atlanta. I'm not quite sure what that means. But Charles Lung, CHP, California Highway Patrol in L.A. has written more 100-plus mile-per-hour tickets than ever.
I didn't know you were in L.A.
Huh?
Those 100-mile-an-hour tickets. I didn't know you were out in L.A.
I know, right?
You must.
And then Stephen Elliott, a great friend up in Canada, says hello from Toronto, Canada. International fan of FreightWaves.
There you go.
Yeah, it's always good to know.
I love it. I love it. So there was some other. So we have this here. Some other just real quick pandemic recovery news. Right? Let me give you a little.
Let's jump in. We have Lori Ann here.
Oh, okay, great. Hello, Lori Ann.
Now. So let's,
hey guys, how are you?
Doing great.
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Very good. So Lori Ann's the senior editor of Guest at CNBC and author of Trade War: Containers Don't Lie. Correct. And It is a mouthful, yes.
Containers don't lie.
Yes. So Lorianne, you have a column out now this morning on American Shipper and FreightWaves, and you write the recent surge in containers from China has created a plethora of bullish headlines, but you caution this may be a bit optimistic. Can you explain those reasons? Yeah,
absolutely. When you're looking at the flow of trade, there are so many different highways out there, if you will, that are giving us forward-looking indicators, right? Especially for those in logistics that need to know, how much of containers are going to be coming in. One of the critical flows of trade is the intra-trade trade lane, which is essential in terms of finished and semi-finished goods. So if you want to see how much is going to be coming to any port in the future, right, globally, you want to look at that trade line and you want to look at the volume of the goods that's traveling along that corridor, if you will, because eventually what's there is going to be coming back to our shores. And right now, based on the TEUs, it's not as bullish as what a lot of people are anticipating.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I've preached that myself before. You got to watch and along the specific lanes, but you can see the different movement or the percentage or the volume along those lanes and see the changes in the trading partners as well, which then changes the maritime lanes, which obviously changes the port of entry into the United States and can skew the whole dynamics of surface transportation, warehousing, distribution, et cetera, correct?
Exactly. And I think sometimes people just look right here at the here and now. You really have to look at the big picture. And when I was starting to look at this trade lane and started seeing the enormous amount of retailers pulling back on the items that they're going to be producing, that really is a red flag for the next 3 months or so for those in logistics to see not only how much is going to be coming in, but where, and like you pointed out, as to the origin of where it's being shipped out of.
And on the origins, you're looking not only at China, but Vietnam, and what do we have? India and Malaysia, and kind of what are you reading into and Bangladesh as well? Yes. What are you reading into those volumes right now?
Those volumes on the offshoring region is a lot lower than where it traditionally is. And if you really think about it in terms of what's happening here in the United States and around the world, the global consumer has changed in terms of what they're buying. They're not buying the latest and greatest dress or shirt or whatever back to business wear, if you will. They're wearing shorts. They're buying PPE, and that's what's pulled back on the retailer volumes, if you will, at the manufacturing plants, and that's really ground zero for what's going to be coming here. So they're pulling back on those items and they're making other products, and those products might not be made in that corridor.
Yeah, exactly. Back to school. Right? There's another demand that is pretty iffy right now, I would imagine, if not gone.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, when you're looking at, I pulled some additional data, which it's interesting. There are a lot of websites out there when it comes to the manufacturers from that origin. They're now publicly shaming U.S. retailers as to who's paying, who's not paying. So what's happening is at that region, you're having companies that some are saying that Kohl's, for example, or Sears, where they made product, but they're not paying for it anymore. Or they have canceled product, which you can understand because people don't want it. You've got the slow steaming right now. You've got all these options that Maritime has been very creative in terms of moving the product, but at a very, very slow pace. And the reason why, the consumer doesn't want it, and the retailer rather pay a cheaper place, right, a cheaper warehouse than paying at a warehouse here in the United States.
And Lorianne, in your column today, you have Kohl's and Sears pegged at canceling over, or right at $500 million worth of orders from Asia. Is that correct?
Exactly. And that is based on data that was supplied to me from the organization that works with all of these retailers in that
So,
the production houses in those regions. And And I'm sorry, like those orders mean less TEUs.
They do, and so you mentioned the term slow steaming, and so we're talking about blanked sailings, and I guess that translates really into larger ships less often, correct? Or it
Yes,
can.
they're canceling ships. So what happened is you've had so many containers that are not moving anymore. You've got the carriers of the world, they have too many. So you have all this space to carry less containers. So in order to maintain a level in the pricing for the freight, they have eliminated all that extra space, if you will, to carry the remaining containers. So that way you're canceling the vessels because you don't need as many vessels to move the less freight. And they're also giving the options, which is slow steaming, which is they're literally taking the longest route possible to get from point A to point B. And they're also giving options, particularly with the retailers or others, where they're like, hey, this one warehouse along the way in this, country is willing to warehouse some of these containers in the meantime. And so that way they can hold those containers at a cheaper location rather than coming here collecting dust and paying big American bucks.
That makes a lot. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, additionally, I'm watching the Freightos Baltics index, the pricing index, and I'm looking at 40-foot equivalent units, China to North America West, and it continues to rise. I mean, they've done a good job at obviously, well, they've done a better than good job at stabilizing the prices, right? I mean, they're up. Yeah. Does this mean loosening of capacity a little bit, or are they just going to enjoy those profits? Does this mean that there's greater the demand than what they thought? So, I mean, and not to say that they should start unblanking everything, but maybe there should be some unblanking going on because capacity is tight enough?
I don't foresee them reversing the canceled vessels. Maybe moving forward they might not, but the trend is holding where they're maintaining the squeeze, if you will, the space squeeze, so you can keep that floor in the pricing. They've been so good, if you will, in terms of constricting the space, if you will, that you actually have a delay, an artificial delay of at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks of containers coming in. It's not because of the demand, it's because of the shrinkage of the space available on those ships.
And if we go back to demand, you mentioned that retailers usually order right now for 1-2 seasons out. So that gives us a pretty good predictive power of how they foresee consumer demand and the shifts in that. And I guess it's not a great picture for your traditional non-discretionary items that you mentioned earlier, right?
Exactly, not at all. I mean, I put a hot link to the website that literally has listed all of the retailers that have canceled, their orders as early as March. I mean, and it makes sense. They have to. I mean, if you think about it, all those, it's funny, like the TJ Maxx's of the world, all these retailers that have had to be closed because they're non-essential. Geez, when they walked in, they were having stuff packed with Easter products, right? All those products left on their floors, right? They're going to have to put those into warehousing or severely discount it. But based on what we're seeing right now, and based on my reporting from other, from prior columns or posts, the retailers really have skewed more towards the PPE, back to school, which you mentioned. The same thing, they're looking at cute hand sanitizer holders, for the backpacks. They're being more strategic in terms of what they're going to be ordering.
Very interesting. Yeah. So, Lori, let me ask you this. So, you were talking about, the goods being canceled and so on, and we've got blanked sailings, and then you've got slow steaming, I guess is the right term that's happening. So, with all these things in place on maritime, and there's such a large percent, obviously, of international trade happens on maritime through the steamships. If there is this uptick in demand, How reactive is maritime to that? Could an uptick or a consumer sentiment come back, or can it be delayed because of that the additional cycle time in the supply chain because of the non flexibility of maritime, or is it flexible enough to be able to turn quickly?
Well, maritime is flexible in terms of being there, because even though that the ships have been canceled, the ships are in various areas. So if they had to add capacity back into the lanes, they are able to. It's just that right now there's not enough from a financial stance to pile on, if you will, another vessel.
Right, and I would suppose that during this time of the blank sailings, et cetera, that container repositioning for a restart was happening at the same time, right? They were gathering those and making sure that they're in the right place for when it turns back on. Is that right?
Exactly, because they kind of know, like, the flow of trade it's pretty cyclical. You kind of know the ebbs and flows of demand. When it comes to logistics, when it comes to when it comes to maritime, the peak season for container shipping, and it just makes sense. It's like back to school. It's the holidays. You're looking at July through September. That's the moneymaker in terms of, the second big moneymaker for logistics this towards the end of this year. So you're going to have to do it sooner rather than later.
Right.
Thank you very much, Lorianne. You can find LaRocco's column today on American Shipper and FreightWaves. And how do our listeners reach out and contact you directly?
You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and it's at LaRocco for both.
Thank you very much. Always
Thank you,
a pleasure.
Lorianne.
Bye, guys.
Very good. Always great columns every month. Every month for American Shipper and FreightWaves, she writes really great columns with really good information using alternative data in a lot of senses, right? So, so that's a good definition of what alternative data is.
I will shout alternative data from the mountaintops for the transportation industry and freight forecasting, and so that's what we talk about, and it's great to hear.
That's great.
And she has a great way of being able to explain it in layman terms, what slow steaming means, et cetera, because it is important to you, even if you're a local driver in Dallas. You are affected by these things.
Yeah, so. And now we'll talk with Jared Flinn, who's the operating partner at Bulk Loads, about another leading indicator, and that is, the raw materials, grains, that kind of harvest,
out of the ground,
agricultural type of things. So how are we doing today, Jared?
Hey, doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Jared.
Yeah. Let's start off. Can you give us and our viewers kind of a background on yourself and Bulk Loads and kind of what you guys do?
Yeah. Bulk Loads, we've been around for 10 years. We're a marketplace or load board specifically for the bulk commodity sector, both dry and liquid bulk. We probably tend to focus a little bit more on the dry, and our niche is more in the agricultural realm. So a lot of your grain, feed, fertilizer, your inputs, that's where we see the majority of our freight that moves through our marketplace.
So it's terrific. So what are you seeing in the markets, especially in the agricultural markets right now, in harvest season and volumes and rates for, I guess, hopper type of trailers, walking floors, I'm spacing on the many others that exist.
So hopper bottoms, that's our biggest equipment type that we move through there. In-dump trailers, walking floors, your belt line bottoms. We even do pneumatic, and then your liquid tankers, which is a whole nother realm. Really, we haven't seen it unchanged a lot. The positive thing we've seen this year, last year, if you remember, we had a lot of flooding here in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And as far as planting season, it delayed a lot of that, which led to a poor harvest. This year, planting's been great. Wheat harvest has started. We've talked with a lot of clients down, especially in the North Texas, Oklahoma regions. Wheat harvest is looking really good in a lot of spots. They've had a lot of adequate rain, good dry temperatures to kind of get that crop moving forward. So I think we're shaping out to have a really good summer wheat harvest. And as long as this weather stays the way it is, we'll have a really good fall crop.
Nice. So outside of ag, you have liquid. Do you deal with mineral out of the ground, kind of industrial, forward-looking type of raw materials, or? Is it mainly like oil?
Yeah. We deal with a lot of different, more on the fertilizer side, I would say. We do have different mines. We deal with coal, although that industry, as we've seen, is starting to diminish more and more. But the main driver of our freight probably comes more on the agricultural landscape.
How are rates and load volumes looking on those agricultural commodities right now? Is it a healthy market? Because we have a really good insight into dry van, reefer, flatbed, but that really niche specialty, dry bulk and liquid bulk too. But focus on the dry bulk. How are volumes and rates going in that area of the world?
Yeah, it's really interesting to look when you look at our sector compared to the van and reefer sector. In some ways, it's an opposite effect, and a lot of it has to do with the dollar. When we have a weak dollar, your grain prices are higher, so your exports are more, so you'll see a lot more tonnage and traffic moved in the bulk sector. But on the flip side, you'll see it reverse on the van side. So it was interesting. We've seen it actually it was slower this year. It picked up a little bit, and then the COVID deal kind of stopped it a little bit. We had a lot, and you've seen with the meat packers and all that, we had huge bottlenecks when it came to a lot of these meat packers finishing off. We're now just seeing those effects right now kind of shape on the grain side, because a lot of those cattle and hogs that were going to the feedlots, those had to be fed off. So now we're seeing that back up.
So it's really interesting that it's good news that the agricultural markets are strong right now. I was going to ask our previous guest, LaRocco, because she tracks this a little, quite a bit actually. The Phase 1 China trade deal and the purchase agreement for those farm exports. What are you seeing? Are you seeing any activity, hearing anything in the agricultural markets about that?
We're seeing a little bit of movement where we've seen more of a negative effect on us, just on the interior here domestically. A lot of these ethanol plants, margins are really slim on ethanol, corn prices, which is driving corn prices lower. So a lot of people don't realize this. We've had, over the past 20 years, I'm taking a guess at this, but like 50, 60 ethanol plants created across the Midwest. Well, every one of those ethanol plants, you got your inputs going in there, your corn, and then you have your byproducts, your ethanol and dried distiller grains. A lot of those plants are shut down or running even 20, 30%. So we've seen a lot of that on the negative side for ours. I mean, just less traffic, less truck tonnage moving in and out of those plants. So so with that being low, it's pushed some of those commodities or crops more to the export market. So it kind of goes back and forth. When we see prices a little bit higher, we'll see exports kind of go down. Prices go down, we'll see it the other way.
I'm sorry, Jared. I was going to ask you to go to rewind just a bit and talk about that relationship that you were talking about that kind of indicates the exports versus, or the bulk movement and carload, et cetera, versus the reefer van movement and stuff. Yeah. Can you reiterate that one more time? Yeah, you went through it quick, and I think it's a really interesting point that I want to make sure people see it.
Yeah, I'll slow down and kind of explain it. So anytime we have a weaker dollar, your exports are going to increase. So you're going to see more your commodities move export. When the dollar gets stronger, you're going to see less exports, because our grains, it's a lot higher to buy for these foreign countries that are purchasing it. But what's interesting, typically, and we watch this all the time, when we see truck tonnage on the interior, when we have a strong dollar, you see your typically, not always, but your tonnage pick up. Here on the domestically, so we see it negative on the grain side, and we have different clients of ours that they do run grain hoppers, and then they also run vans, and then we'll talk with them, and there's different periods where they'll shift those sectors from running hoppers over to the van, and then vice versa, just depending on where the rates are.
Jared, really quickly on going back into the building materials, the gypsum, limestone, those type of commodities. What are you seeing with that, if anything, if you have a pulse on that market at all? How are the industrial type of raw materials performing?
We haven't seen it unchanged, which is a positive thing. We talked to a lot of clients that are still moving a lot of your raw materials going into On our end, it'd be more the sand and gypsum going into your drywall, going into your different other building products like shingles and stuff like that. But we have a client of ours here in the Midwest up in Wichita, but they said that's actually increased on the building side.
That's good news. How about the liquid bulk market?
The liquid bulk, and I'm not as knowledgeable, so liquid's kind of its own little animal from what we've seen over the past years. There's not a lot of spot liquid moves in the U.S., and just because typically your liquid tankers are very expensive, a lot of companies that are going to invest into those types of equipment, they're not out there moving spot markets, so we don't see that stuff come through our marketplace as much. I will say I knew that it was, just speaking with some companies that broker that freight, I know it was a lot slower earlier on this year. I haven't heard lately if that's picked up or not.
Good news. Good news. So Jared, how do people reach out and contact you directly and learn more about bulkloads.com?
Yeah, we'd love to have if there's any companies that are interested, especially in the bulk sector, the trailer types that we deal. We're on all social media outlets, so find us there. If you want to go straight to our website and just learn a little bit more about us, it's just bulkloads, bulkloads.com. There's a link on there that you can learn more. And if you ever want to call us anytime, we have pretty much a 24-hour hotline. It's 1-800-518-9240.
And you also do a podcast, is that correct? What's the podcast name?
Yeah, it's just called the Bulk Loads Podcast. We wanted to start this. I guess we're going on 2 years now, and man, it's really picked up just on our viewership. But yeah, we just focus trucking in general, but we kind of dabble more on the bulk side. I know there's several other trucking podcasts out there that I actually listen to and get a lot of information on, but we really try to kind of put maybe a little bit of ag spin on there, especially when it deals with, because the way I feel, and you guys know this, and this is why I love what you guys are doing, the more knowledge and information we can give to our users and our subscribers, the better decisions they can make in their businesses.
Amen.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you for your time today, Jared.
Yep. Thanks again, guys.
Flinn.
Thanks, Jared.
Jared Flinn, bulkloads.com.
Awesome.
It's always good to know what's happening in the agricultural markets and those raw materials as they come by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and I wanted to get down that the weaker dollar, the stronger dollar makes incredible sense, but it seems like you went through it so fast. I just want to make sure that people understood that, because you can look at that and see carload versus truckload and kind of an indication of what's happening there. So.
Yeah, it's that inverse relationship, right?
Inverse relationship and alt data.
As the dollar goes up, everything gets less expensive, and when the dollar goes down, everything gets more expensive. And we're going to switch a little bit and go to the finance and debt markets for the industry with John Kingston, our editor-at-large here at FreightWaves. How are you doing today, John?
Good yourself. How you doing, guys?
We're doing great. So, editor-at-large, they haven't found you yet, huh?
No, I'm still out there. You may think I'm in New York, but I could be anywhere right now.
You could. Tell us about the GLOBALTRANZ article that you have up on FreightWaves.com. This morning.
So on Friday, Moody's downgraded the debt of GLOBALTRANZ, and GLOBALTRANZ is owned by private equity. It's not publicly traded, but they have publicly traded debt. So if you have publicly traded debt, you get that debt rated by the ratings agencies: Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch being the three biggest. So from a journalist perspective, it's always good when that happens, because you kind of get a look into the finances of a company that you might not otherwise get. So GLOBALTRANZ had their debt rating cut by one level, and it turns out I went back and looked, and they had the debt rating cut by S&P back in April. They're deep in the junk territory. There's a cutoff. It's somewhat arbitrary between investment grade and non-investment grade, and they are, I think, I counted 7 steps down now on the non-investment grade, which is colloquially known as junk. For both S&P and for GLOBALTRANZ. Now, I did have a very good discussion with GLOBALTRANZ's CEO, Renee Krug, and their CFO, and they say the problem is that they did what a lot of companies were kind of told to do, which was when the pandemic hit, draw down your revolvers. And you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Bank of Montreal and their Bank of Business in their transportation sector soared in the second quarter. No, obviously there's no logical reason for that in terms of business. It soared because so many companies pulled down their revolver. GLOBALTRANZ said that's what we did too. The problem is that puts up the debt load to a very high level relative to EBITDA. So I did find one little sort of problem in their argument in that Moody's also criticized the size of their debt pile, their cash pile. And the thing is, the cash pile would have been fattened up by the money you pulled down from the revolver. And Renee Krug had made it clear that they took down the money and they just put it aside and they hadn't done anything with it. They didn't spend it. They didn't use it to pay for any of their operating expenses. So, they don't think that they didn't come right out and say, we don't think our debt rating is justified because, quite frankly, doing that with ratings agencies tends to be like putting a stick inside a hornet's nest. You just don't really want to do that. They were the other thing I want to point out is they sent me data after the conversation that showed their Dun & Bradstreet rating and one other sort of debt collection agency that showed that they've got very strong ratings, because the problem with a company like GLOBALTRANZ is if you get the reputation out there that you're not going to pay your bills, even though there's no evidence that that's the case, if you get that reputation, carriers might be a little reluctant to do business with you. So that's got to be a very legitimate concern.
And I think a lot of that debt level is due to acquisitions because they've been very acquisitive. They're private equity backed, which is a game plan, a common game plan for private equity.
Right, and the CEO said we've used our revolver to make acquisitions. Again, they said that we've never used it to pay day-to-day expenses, and they're still looking at acquisitions. They said there was nothing imminent, but yes, they have made a lot of acquisitions. And but they've kind of got the debt rating to show it. This did give me the opportunity to try to poke around the Moody's and S&P sites to find any kind of peers and what their debt rating was. I did find Transplace. Transplace's debt rating is about a year old, and it's only one notch above GLOBALTRANZ. So I don't want to indicate that GLOBALTRANZ has got some horrible debt rating that's completely out of line with the rest of the industry. I also found the debt rating for CEVA Logistics. That wasn't that great either. I did find C.H. Robinson. They were like BBB+, so they're in great shape. So this is an industry that I think to have a really stellar debt rating is kind of tough. And a lot of companies don't even have publicly traded debt, so this is not even an issue for them. But GLOBALTRANZ does, and they've got a rating that's not great.
John, we're short on time right now, but if you can give us a 30-second summation of what the oil market's doing right now, that would be wonderful.
I don't think you can do it.
Can we make a bet? Either. We should.
I don't think I need 30 seconds. It's doing nothing. I mean, it's been steadily. On the crude side, diesel's sort of slowly coming up with it. But what the most interesting thing for this audience is that the inventory levels for diesel are just off the charts. Because companies didn't want to make gasoline, in March and April, but they wanted to keep running, so they made diesel. They don't want to make jet fuel, so they make more diesel. So the diesel inventories measured in the U.S. in days supply are records. They've never been this high in the years that they've been keeping records. So there is just lots and lots of diesel out there. Price of crude has been steadily climbing. The DOE price yesterday went up a grand total of 0.7 cents from the week before, a number that we had precisely in SONAR in the week-to-week comparison. So it's kind of dull right now, which I think for the trucking sector is good. It's kind of nice if your fuel just sits there and you don't have to worry about it going up or down.
So about a year ago, we were talking about IMO 2020 and kind of the effects, and the world we could never have predicted the world in a year later after IMO 2020, or what disruptions could make it just a non-issue right now.
Yeah, there were really stupid people last year who thought that IMO 2020 was going to be a big deal. You're looking but right now the world has so many distillate molecules out there The concern was always basically that the amount of distillate molecules would be squeezed because you'd be taking an intermediate product that's used to make diesel and instead making very low sulfur fuel oil. There's so many distillate molecules out there right now that it's not an issue. Would it have been an issue if it wasn't for the pandemic? We shall never know that.
I got an air filter. I got an air filter that takes out the distillate molecules.
Flights aren't flying, and maritime, everyone's doing blank selling.
Absolutely.
Took the competition out of the market. Thank you very much, Kingston,
Okay.
and have a great day.
Thank you so much, John. And hey, John, true to form, he fit 30 seconds worth of nothing into 53 seconds, by the way, just for the record.
That is true to form. Thanks, John.
Awesome. We have enough time to do,
we do, yeah.
something good? What's good?
Let's do something good.
All right, let's do it. Uber Freight launches Thank a Trucker campaign to celebrate and support carriers and drivers. With support from Four Kites, House, and Smashmallow, Uber Freight is providing 10,000 care packages for truck drivers across the U.S. These kits include necessities like cleaning supplies and masks to help distribute the care packages on the road and at truck stops. We have partnered with nonprofits like Meals for 18 Wheels, Real Women in Trucking, TruckersFinalMile.org, and Truckers Emergency Assistant Responders, which is TARE. So nice.
Very great. I mean,
Right?
the charity and giving back continues across the industry, which is a great sign and something we always like to hear about here on the Midday Market Update, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Helping out those truckers, making their lives easier, bringing the respect, and giving the importance to their job that is deserved, I hope. And we always preach it. It needs to continue into the future, because just because this is over doesn't mean they're not out there bringing everything you need to those stores and to your house.
You're exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. So let's go over what's on FreightWaves TV for this week.
Let's do it.
And we'll start it off. We talked about a little bit, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so in about an hour after we wrap right here. Andrew Cox and I will be talking about alternative data sets for logistics and their beginnings in finance, as well as Shopify and Walmart's partnership, and that's at 2 o'clock today. Today.
Nice.
Yes. And then at 12 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, put that coffee down. Me and Tuner, we have a special guest on, Tyler Hildebrand, who's an account manager at Reliance.
Oh, you were telling me about this story.
Yeah,
this is cool.
He has an MFA in art. He does video, great sales videos, stories, like 90-second, 2-minute, like mini films that he sends out to prospect. There's great lessons in it, just not for the video, but for how you communicate, how you get your foot in the door, how do you be memorable whenever you're out there prospecting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's gonna be a
story.
great show.
I've got a story from when I was at Roadway that I'll share with you.
Okay.
Maybe I'll walk in front of the camera accidentally and share it with you.
Yes.
Put that coffee down.
And then 2 o'clock, we had 2 o'clock tomorrow, Eastern Time, as always, is Freightonomics. And that's where Anthony Smith, our lead economist, and Zach Strickland, our director of freight market intelligence, will break down freight in an economic type of spin. So that's always a great show. And then
we're back here Thursday.
4 p.m. with Sonar, though. 4 p.m. on Wednesday.
40, yeah, that's right.
4 p.m.
Yeah.
And
Always good.
then Tuesday, noon, we're back here.
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday. Thursday at noon, we're back here.
Yeah.
With great outside guests like we had today. And then at 4 p.m., we have freight forecasting.
We do, and that's going to be a good one.
What do you have?
Orders, numbers, Fed numbers came out. Orders are out. Production numbers are out. So we'll be going through those and seeing what's doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then noon on Friday is always What the Truck.
What the Truck.
You had a great show on Monday, and you can find all this on Freightcast and tv.freightwaves.com. Any guest booked that you can share for?
For What the Truck. Oh, no, absolutely
not.
On
Friday?
Absolutely not. You're going to have to wait for Dooner's announcements. It's killer, and I just got.
It always is.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of response on Play It Forward, right? So you got an instrument, hook us up, hit me up.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's becoming a thing now.
Oh, it's not just a thing.
I guess you have to be musically inclined. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And we also had a comment here from Stan Duncan. It was a little bit too long for me to concentrate on reading it, but it looks fascinating, and we'll probably post this out on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, we definitely
He's always
will,
got
yeah.
a great spin.
I
He
was reading that too. I was reading that too.
Friday or Monday?
Yeah.
On Monday.
Monday.
Yeah. Last Friday, Stan was.
Oh, yeah. No, last Friday.
Anyway,
yeah. They all
that
run
wraps
together,
it up
man.
for
What
this
month is
edition
it?
of the Midday Market Update. Catch you Thursday at noon again.
Peace and love.